Digital 410 Media proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast with your hosts, Don Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Dennis Blocker.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, your favorite World War II podcast, and things are finally starting to settle down a little bit. We're going to get kind of back to our old format, and I think what a better way to start off today's episode before we get into the nitty-gritty about Okinawa, because, well, April 1st is right around the corner. Jeff Copsetta, you had an event last weekend, correct? And give us a synopsis of what happened there.
Yeah, my hometown has a CAF squadron here that I've been supporting for a number of years now, and it was, I believe, the 34th annual Blue Bonnet Air Show. So some warbirds came in. I provided the ground axe, which this year extended from World War II talk and World War II weapon demos, including a flamethrower. All the way to, we expanded this year to a 4 aircraft formation, all Vietnam era, 2 Hueys, Bird Dog, and an O2, kind of circling around, or an L-17, I'm sorry, and the O2. And we had a LERP team come in with a downed pilot, and we reenacted what a downed pilot in Vietnam rescue would look like. And the history of that, believe it or not, as I was writing the script to narrate this whole ordeal, started in Burma in 1944, a helicopter rescue, which was really interesting, I think, for folks to learn. So it was a lot of fun. And aside from that's just kind of what I've been doing there for years, it was exciting on another front because it was the first event that COG had been represented at a public event that it didn't host. COG was one of the vendors there, which was really great.
That's cool.
So yeah, it made front page, of course, and a really nice article in the local paper. So yeah, never a dull moment here.
Hey, Don.
Yes, sir.
So following Jeff around is a friend of ours, Nick, who's also been very instrumental in videoing everything having to do with COG and the Rooftop Oath. And he was going to interview Jeff that day. And he's following him around, and he's just getting tremendous shots. He's got all this great equipment. And there's this amazing video where Jeff has wrapped up. He's pretty much done, like literally, like done. And he's walking back to his amazing educational trailer, his displays, and he's walking back. Now, if you can imagine, the videographer, Nick, is following behind him with his handheld Steadicam, and he's just trailing on the same pace, like step for step with Jeff. And Jeff is walking through a crowd of hundreds of people who are all facing the opposite direction, like facing the camera. So this image, you see all these people looking, like hundreds of people looking in one direction. And Jeff is purposely walking the opposite direction of where everybody is looking. And meanwhile, the soundtrack, real-time soundtrack, is the amazing blades of the Hueys cutting the air, just foop, 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 the whole time, and just like a badass, just walking away from danger, walking away from what hundreds of people are looking at. And it immediately reminded me, and I sent the video to Jeff, of that great SNL short skit they did with music video of Cool Guys Don't Look at Explosions.
Yep.
It was awesome. It was like one of my favorite videos.
Every Michael Bay movie, guy just walking away. that awesome shot in Desperado when Antonio Banderas is walking away with Selma Hayek.
That was Jeff.
That's awesome.
So cool.
Well, I'm happy that the event went well, and it's always enjoyable to participate in an event that you're not responsible for the logistics of. You just get there, set up your stuff, and get going, and just enjoy the day.
Yeah, one day that
was responsible for it.
Yeah, that was a busy day. It started with the Donut Dollies podcast, which hasn't aired yet, but I did an interview with them from 8 to 9. and then it was the pilot briefing, and then we briefed with the two Huey pilots and the ground crew, and we made sure we had all of our gear correct and a couple smoke canisters, and then it was right after that I linked up with the guy shooting the flamethrower, so everything was good there. And then it started with the first air act, and then I was out there before I knew it. I'm out in front of the crowd talking about all this stuff, and as soon as the aircraft, like once they were in the final pattern of approach to land to pick up the LERP team and the other Huey was flying cover, I literally, yeah, it was almost like mic drop. I'm done. I'm heading back to the trailer, and Nick was literally following me back because that's when we were starting the interview. Right? Like it was boom, 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 boom. But yeah, he's gonna have some amazing footage because Don, maybe you've seen one. I never have seen a TBM Avenger in flight. I've seen one static plenty of times, but if you can imagine, the end of this air show was a Corsair, then a TBM, then a B-25, just constantly doing photo passes from
Wow.
right to left, explosions going off, culminating with the 150-foot firewall. It's like 200 gallons of gasoline going up at once with the B-25, Bombay doors open. But that Corsair screaming in, and the Avenger was screaming in, and they were so low that from where I was at with Nick, you could see the Corsair approach, and then he's just getting lower and lower and lower, and he's just on his wingtip, so you can see the whole top of the aircraft. And from where we were at, the porta potties temporarily blocked the view of the Corsair as he's screaming down the runway. It was like unbelievable. Yeah. So the interview that I'm doing with Nick was like, squirrel, every time they flew by, man.
Well, and the cool thing about flamethrowers, weapons demos are always a fan's favorite, but the flamethrower has a different aspect that nothing else does, and that is the heat and the distance in which it can be felt. I mean,
Yes.
those things. I mean, yes, people at home like, it's a flame. No, you don't realize how many yards, well, not feet, yards away, you can feel that heat rolling in on
impressive.
you. It's definitely impressive.
Absolutely.
I don't know if I told you guys, but back when we did the Tarawa event in Fort Morgan, they had a flamethrower guy out there, and they had some people sign up for it. And then, of course, if you're going to have a flamethrower event, you got to have the fire department there. And so they had people sign up and pay because obviously the fuel has cost to it. Well, by the end of the day, they had burnt through the diesel. But, good old boys being good old boys, the fire guys had an entire tank of agricultural diesel in the back of their truck. And so the demonstration went on for hours. Each fireman got to use it. And great thing is we flew in some Japanese living historians. And so we have a picture of one of the Japanese living historians with the American flamethrower on shooting it. And just the amount of heat that rolls off those things, it's just... and plus, when I got to experience it there in Texas as well, it's almost undescribable how hot it is. And then you just think of the poor people who had to be on the working into that in combat. Just shudder to think. And with that being said, we're going to get into the topic of Okinawa. April 1st, 1945, April Fool's Day. But there was no joke waiting on the shores of Okinawa. More than 180,000 American troops approached the island in what would become the largest amphibious assault in Pacific theater. They were ready, trained, armed, and expecting chaos. Machine gun fire, artillery, blood in the surf. Instead, they met silence. No resistance on the beaches, no immediate counterattack, just an eerie calm stretching inland. For the moment, it felt wrong, almost too easy. But it wasn't luck. It was strategy. Despite tradition, the Japanese forces chose not to defend the shoreline. They were waiting, dug deep in the island's rugged terrain, hidden in fortified positions, preparing for a different kind of fight, one built in attrition, patience, and sacrifice. That was the beginning of an uncontested landing that soon would turn into one of the bloodiest battles of World War II. Because Okinawa wasn't just another island. It was the doorstep to Japan. And both sides knew what happened here could decide the end of the war. One of the interesting things, did you know, and you might be interested in this, Dennis, you have an appreciation for the Navy. Did you know that actually the invasion of Normandy had more ships overall, but the firepower of the invasion of Okinawa actually had more firepower? So just to put it in perspective, Normandy, June 6, 1944, they had 6,900 ships and landing crafts. On Okinawa, they had 1,300 ships. But when it came to naval gunfire, Normandy had 7 battleships. Naval firepower for Okinawa, they had 18 battleships. Normandy had 23 cruisers. In Okinawa, they had 27 cruisers. When it came to aircraft carriers, but when it came to destroyers, Normandy had 100 destroyers. There was 177 destroyers off Okinawa. So when it actually came to naval firepower, Okinawa had a more high concentration of firepower than we did in Normandy and D-Day.
Yeah.
Once again, there was more ships in general in Normandy, but when it came to firepower-based ships such as battleships, cruisers, and destroyers, there was more at Okinawa, which was something that I was unaware of until I started reading this book. Jeff, I think you may have almost completed my Robert Leckie library. I have to go back and see what all he has done. Obviously, I have A Helmet for My Pillow. I have Strongmen Armed. I have his other book. And then you gave me Okinawa, The Last Battle of World War II by Robert Leckie, which I started reading off and on when I got back. And so I was reading on that and saw the dates coming up. I'm like, well, we're right there on the D-Day for Okinawa. And Robert Leckie pointed out in his book that, firepower-wise, it was we had more concentrated firepower than we did at D-Day. But the silence didn't last long. Within days of the April 1st landing, the illusion of an easy victory began to collapse. U.S. forces pushed inland, led by the 1st, the 6th, and the 2nd Marine Division, alongside with Army units, the 7th, the 27th, and the 77th Infantry Divisions, as well as the 96th Infantry Division. At first, progress seemed steady. Airfields were taken, ground was gained. However, by April 6th, American troops began to meet the true Okinawa. The Japanese had fallen back to a heavily fortified defensive line in the south known as the Shuri Line. And this is where the battle really began. Names that would become synonymous with brutality started to emerge. Kazui Ridge, Cactus Ridge, Sugarloaf Hill, Hacksaw Ridge. Each one a fortress of mud, stone, and steel, each one defended to the last man. Rain turned to battlefields in the swamp, visibility dropped, every step forward came at a cost. The Marines and soldiers weren't just fighting for miles anymore, they were fighting for yards, and sometimes just inches, because Okinawa wasn't a battle of movement, it was a battle of endurance, and it had only just begun. Now, it was interesting when I was in Texas, Jeff. You and I were talking to some of the people at the event, and you and I were talking about how the Army really doesn't get the recognition they deserve when it comes to contribution and campaigns in the Pacific. And perfect example for Okinawa. So we all know the Marine Corps at Okinawa. So you had the 1st Marine Division, the 6th Marine Division. But when it came to the Army, you had the 7th Infantry Division, the 27th Infantry Division, the 77th Infantry Division, and the 96th Infantry Division. So the Army was well represented and put in a lot of work and a lot of effort on Okinawa, which obviously we're also aware of the story that came out of Hacksaw Ridge that took place in Okinawa as well.
Well, I just remember like back in Branson, Missouri, like 05, 06, the LCI reunions that I would go to, my grandfather being on an LCI. I remember sitting at a table with a gentleman who was on a LCI 82, and he was talking about his time at Okinawa. The LCI 82 was part of the gunboat group. As a matter of fact, the LCI 82 was part of LCI Flotilla 3, and that was the same flotilla as my grandfather. So they were the most battle tested and the toughest. As a matter of fact, because of their reputation, which they earned in battle, from Attu all the way through to Kwajalein, the Marshalls, Eniwetok, Perry Island, Saipan, Guam, Tinian, Peleliu, they were there. In the D-Day at Peleliu, firing rockets over Sledge's head. Iwo Jima, and of course, here they are at Okinawa. Their battle flags, as you would say, there are just, second to none. And As a matter of fact, earns them a spot with the Victory Fleet in Tokyo. They get to go into Tokyo Harbor, LCF Tilt 3. But uh, sitting there talking to this gentleman, he was telling me about their time at Okinawa, and for a ship like that, they have no illusions about what's ahead of them. They are battle tested. They're not fresh from the States. They're on edge. They're manning their guns, and they know about the kamikazes by this time. And on this particular night is April 3rd. It was around 10:30 at night. Um, One of the officers, the exec, he talked about uh, the fact that experience had taught them that when they go to general quarters, they only ever went to full general quarters. They never did half the crew. Sometimes they would have the habit of maybe half the crew so that people are resting, but they would go full, and they made that a habit, and especially at Okinawa. And they said around 10:30 at night that they heard aircraft engines approaching from dead ahead. Now, on this particular night, there was no moon, and they're just staring into dark, into black, manning their 40s and 20s and 30s, and but all of a suddenly the engine cut out, and they thought, well, maybe this is it. Like they're gliding in, this is it, and then nothing. They heard nothing, and suddenly, one of the lookouts says, I think I see a submarine. Of course, you're like, is this a mini submarine? And at this point in the game, they're like, well, they wouldn't put it past the Japanese, and who knows? Maybe it is. So, but nobody wants to put on a searchlight. No one's going to do that. So they just are just everybody's on edge. And that's the one thing that, looking over the firsthand accounts from the captain, the executive officer, and the others, that's the one thing that really comes across, is that they are on edge, and they are fingers on the firing mechanisms, ready to just cut loose if they have to. And of course, they're ribbing the guy who's like, I saw a mini sub. And they're like, okay, we can't see anything. And this guy miraculously can see a mini sub. And all of a sudden, out of the night, close up, they see a silhouette, and it looks like the conning tower of a mini sub. And they're looking, and as a matter of fact, I'll just tell you that it turns out to be the aircraft whose engine had cut out, and they believe it to be a Kate, and they can see it floating. And I'll just read you from the action report here. And what's unusual about this war diary is that it's, usually they're cut and dry, right? They're just facts, times, in and out.
Yep.
But they says, a small light flickered on and off in the greenhouse. That's the cockpit of the enemy aircraft. A small light flickered on and off in the greenhouse, and about 50 rounds of 20 millimeter fire were fired into the plane. The light was later thought to be due to electrical shorting. The plane disappeared in the swells, and after 1/2 hour of fruitless search, it was presumed to have sunk. Now, just over the horizon, the moon now is just over the horizon. The life raft is sighted, and the searchlight is there. The captain tells them, go ahead and flip on the searchlight and let's see what's going on here. And the in the life raft, it contains 3 Japanese flyers, and evidently this crew from the aircraft. And what I'll do is I'm going to switch over to the firsthand account from the executive officer. And he says, there were 3 men in the life raft. It's very quickly evident as they had their white cloth armbands with the red ball in the center. They were lying one in the other's laps with their legs dangling over this very small life raft, which was painted in very bright colors. If I remember, predominantly reds and yellows, although they may have been other colors. It was quite gaudy, and there were strips around the edge of the life raft. And as we came alongside, I recall having heard someone call out, he's got a hand grenade. or something to that effect. And I was on the main deck at the time trying to direct our gunners mates who were equipped with Browning automatics to get them into position, at least to cover the attempt to take these men aboard. There seemed to be little doubt or little question as to what we should do again, as I say, having been pretty well prompted and seeing other Jap examples of trickery. There seemed to be little else to do but to riddle these men and do away with them, which was very well handled from the conning station by a 30 caliber machine gun at that point. The raft was riddled to the extent that it did start sinking, and the three men were then floating in the water. Mr. Arno, the captain, moved the ship forward and back over the swells, which again kept us moving at all times. With other men on the ships and with the boat hooks, we eventually retrieved two bodies, of which we were positive one was the navigator. And again, we're not sure if it was the plane we had shot at earlier, but we feel very certainly that it was. There was some difficulty, as Mr. Arno has said, in getting the body to release the hand grenade. We had a great deal of sloshing up and down to do it in order to get the hand grenade out of the hand of this man. And I was surprised at the terrific weight the combined man with his clothes in the water seemed to have as we tried pulling him aboard. We pulled these men aboard, two of them, one at the starboard side of the ship and one over the stern. And they get these guys aboard, and of course, their purpose is to search their pockets and whatnot, and they find a knife and a really awesome watch, and of course pictures and flags and letters and things like that, and they're laying them all out on the deck there, or not on the deck, but on the table there in the galley. And that's when one of the guys says, one of the lookouts says, something coming in. And the guys look, and a small boat was observed from the seaward side, rapidly approaching forward of the bow. Now, these guys they're the inner perimeter of, I forgot to mention this earlier, fellas, but they're on the inner perimeter of the screen of the capital ships and the transports. So they're about 2 miles off the beach. So they can plainly see the beach. At one point, one of the guys talks about they can see a horse grazing, which really astounded them because the horse was just calmly grazing as rockets and stuff are blowing up all around, and weapons fire. But so they're close into the beach. They can see lights, they can see the soldiers, they can see troops. And a small boat was observed from the seaward side, rapidly approaching forward of the bow, and the order was given to open fire. Approximately 50 rounds were fired from the 30 caliber machine guns, but the fire was believed to have gone astern. The 40 millimeter, 20 millimeter gunners were unable to get off any fire at all. And the 20 millimeter gunner states that he was unable to loosen the retaining clamp and train the gun. And the 40 millimeter pointer, he either froze in his seat or did not see the target, which is improbable considering that the boat was approaching from the moonlit side. The 400 millimeter pointer, though, he is still missing, and consequently a statement from him cannot be presented. And he's missing because the ship slams into the side of the LCI and detonates. And the sailors then are confronted with this giant hole in the side of the ship, and the realization that, oh, you had aircraft coming in at you. Well, guess what? Now you've got ships to deal with, speedboats, and the ship sinks. But it's kind of another one of those things. I'm ashamed to say that I only recently heard Dan Carlin's his podcast episodes about the war against Japan in the Pacific, and anyone who has done any studying at all on that will know that as the Americans are getting closer and closer to Japan, the body count's getting higher and higher and higher, and it's taking a lot more. And another thing that's very apparent is that the steps that the military and that they're going to try and inflict American casualties. Now it's ships. Now it's these speedboats, and the guys are convinced they're never going to survive. They're never going to make it home, and it's just another little notch on why to use the A-bomb as far as the military is concerned.
Mm-hmm. And to
what are your
Dennis's
thoughts on that?
Well, I was going to say, to your point, to put a fine point on it, casualties. Let's talk casualty real quick from Okinawa. On the United States side, you had 12,500 killed, 36,000 wounded. The Japanese had, which we all know they're not exactly honest on the reporting, but 100,000 plus killed. But then you had the civilian numbers. You had 100,000 to 150,000 killed, because once again, we got to rely on Japanese reporting of the time. So by June 22nd, 1945, the organized resistance ended. Japanese commanders committed suicide. The island was secure, but at an enormous cost. And as Dennis was saying, Okinawa shows exactly what the invasion of Japan would look like. I mean, high casualties, fanatical resistance, civilian involvement. And so it was Okinawa, and the experiences there, especially when they had, we've heard the stories of the walking wounded from hospitals, and local civilians trying to fight with anything from a pugil stick to a wooden mallet. Just, it was, when you take in consideration the population increase on the island of Japan versus Okinawa and the fanaticism involved, trying to wrap your mind around boots on the ground on that island, it would have just been a tremendous bloodbath on both sides. The advance across Okinawa was slow and unforgiving. What had started as a silent landing turned into a grinding, brutal crawl through mud, blood, and steel. The deeper the U.S. forces pushed to the south, the more the island fought back. Jagged ridgelines, hidden bunkers, interlocking fields of fire. Every hill became a battlefield, every ridge a killing ground. Rain poured endlessly, turning the terrain into thick, sucking swamps. Bodies, American and Japanese alike, lay where they fell, sometimes for days, sometimes longer. The air carried the weight of it, the smell of death, of cordite, of a battlefield that refused to move quickly. The men weren't just exhausted, they were worn down, physically, mentally, completely. And yet, they kept advancing. Through places like Sugarloaf Hill, where Marines attacked again and again, suffering devastating losses just to gain a few yards, only to be pushed back and forced to do it all over again. Through the Shuri Line, where every inch forward came at a cost, paid in lives. Acts of courage stood out against the chaos. Private First Class Desmond Doss, a medic at Hacksaw Ridge, refused to carry a weapon, but under relentless fire he stayed behind to help save the wounded, luring dozens of men to an encampment one by one. Sergeant Mitchell Page of the 1st Marine Division held his ground during the massive enemy assault earlier in the Pacific, and the Marines on Okinawa carried the same spirit, standing firm even when the odds were overwhelming. There were many others, stories of men throwing themselves on grenades, holding positions alone, and refusing to fall back. Because on Okinawa, survival often depended on someone else's bravery. By the time the fighting ended in late June of 1945, the cost was staggering. Over 12,000 Americans killed, tens of thousands wounded. On the Japanese side, over 100,000 soldiers died. And civilians, caught in the middle, suffered unimaginable losses. Okinawa wasn't just a battle, it was a warning. A glimpse of what an invasion of the mainland China might look like. A glimpse of what the invasion of mainland China might look like. And a sobering reminder of just how high of a price victory could be.
Well, there's something else I think that we need to consider there too, and obviously I've done quite a bit of research since the justification of the daylight bombing and the atomic bomb was my thesis. I actually recall there was a Coast Guardsman that I had invited to the Nimitz years ago. He had participated in 7 invasions as an LCVP coxswain from Kwajalein to Okinawa. He put the army at Okinawa.
Wow.
And he published 2 books that I know of. There may have been more, but they're really, really good reads. And I may have mentioned them on the show before, but if you can find them, D-Days in the Pacific. His name is Ken Wiley. That is really an interest. I mean, how much coverage does the Coast Guard get, right?
Very little.
So he's a brand new kid. He's rushed through. I believe his basic training was like in Florida. It was just super cush. He's 18 years old, and he's made the coxswain on an LCVP. So the stories of just him trying to command, this big plywood boat was just ridiculous, right? With his crew and just the stories there alone are fascinating, and all the things that he encountered throughout those 7 invasions. But the second book was 72 Hours That Changed the World, and that was the time spent between the two atomic bombs, August 6th and August 9th. And one of the factors that he mentioned was the suicide boats at Okinawa, and who knows how many they had, but it was very simple to basically what they would do is they would just cram a bunch of explosives in a boat and sink it, tie it down, and then at night they would have swimmers swim out to it, dive down, cut the ropes, it would come up and surface, they start the motor and ram into the ships. And the fear of that at mainland was a huge factor. But I think the most important thing to think about here, what the most important lesson from Okinawa is we were not going to be fighting this organized large imperial Japanese army or battalions of special naval landing forces. We were going to those were eliminated on throughout the entire island hopping campaign, as the Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere went from the largest empire in human history to strictly just now mainland Japan. What we were going to be fighting were the wives and children of the Imperial Japanese soldiers and sailors that were defending those islands. Fanaticism aside, there was no victory involved in sending hundreds of thousands of boys onto the beaches of mainland Japan to shoot a bunch of women and kids. We had seen enough of that. There would have been no victory there. I mean, that they would have all come home. Every survivor would have been an unbelievably crippled soul, and not that we didn't have that already, right? Just the civilian consideration on all of those islands, where applicable. And Okinawa was the biggest of them all, 100,000 civilian potential casualties. And I think, Don, I think your numbers may be a little low there, and I don't know if there's ever been an official one, but I saw something like over 60,000 total U.S. casualties, 12,000 killed in action, over 50,000 wounded, and I know it was the largest loss of life for the Navy.
Yeah.
That I know. Whatever it is, the numbers aside, it doesn't matter. Statistical data. But I think to me that's the most important thing what Okinawa taught us, and how much of that was used going into Korea, going into Vietnam, the entire Cold War, dealing with the civilian consideration. And there was a doctrine that I was trained under called MET-TC. It was your mission, enemy, time, terrain, and the most important one was civilian consideration. That factor in any mission it's a whole different dynamic, right? Terrain you're trained for, you're prepared for, there's maps, right? You basically figure out as much enemy information as possible. You understand the mission. Time is of the essence. You main and gain, tempo and focus, all the things, the fundamentals of recon. But when you throw civilian consideration on the battlefield, it doesn't matter, the best laid plan goes out the window. And as a battlefield commander, you're not only dealing with this kind of broken tempo, but you're also now dealing with an 18, 19-year-old kid, a replacement. This is his first action, and he just shot a girl in the face because she was running at him with a hand grenade.
Right.
That is, to me, I think that is what does not make enough of the history books when we read about Okinawa, when we read about Saipan. It's easy for armchair generals now to argue against the atom bomb. Clearly, they've never been on a battlefield with a civilian consideration, right? So
Right.
it was the most important lesson, I think, for the United States military for the 20th and into the 21st century.
Wow. Yeah, and they have been training their people to fight with spikes and pikes and, and just sacrifice themselves and train to throw themselves under tanks. And, and the guys that had seen the Japanese fathers strangle their own children in the surf at Saipan, so that they would not surrender to the Americans, that scared them. And they said, man, we're going to have to kill everybody to get this over with. We're going to have to absolutely kill everyone. And what does that look like?
Well, not to mention the fact either, kind of like Jeff said, take fanaticism aside, right? Even if you don't have a populace of quote unquote fanatics, anytime you invade someone's homeland, they're going to be more likely to
Yeah.
try to fight for their homeland. Doesn't matter if you're fanatic or not. You got an invading army coming for your property, coming for your town, coming for your people, coming for your kids. You're going to be more likely to stand up and try to do something about it, even if you're outmanned and outnumbered, or you know, depending on what side you're on, you might be convinced that if I don't fight and if I am taken prisoner, something horrible may happen to me. And so you got both those aspects aligned, plus a huge population, just the overwhelming number of people.
This interview that I read you guys from this officer, that's actually a 1945 interview. And he, I mean, you can hear it. You can almost hear it in his voice, the way he describes, just so casual. I mean, just riddled them. Yeah, we just riddled them and took care of them. It's like, man, unleashing that type of callousness on a civilian population, like Jeff's talking about. I mean, these guys by this point, they're everybody, the sailors, even, I mean, the LCI gunboat sailors, they're all killers now. And let's just get it over with. And we're not going to make it home, probably. We're probably not going to make it home. So let's just get it on with. Let's get on with it. And it comes across in something. This is little bitty snapshot, a little mosaic piece from a gunboat perfectly illustrates what Jeff was talking about. That this is going to be horrific if we have to take the islands, the home islands.
And to give a little perspective to that, this census is, I believe, at the end of 45. So this is post-war numbers. But post-war population in Japan, population mainly in Japan in late 1945 was approximately 72 million people. And that's post-war numbers. So the idea of trying to do a land warfare amongst a population that big, now obviously that doesn't relay ages, but still, I mean, that's just a huge populace.
That's 100,000 Okinawan, over 100,000 Okinawan civilians, and they weren't even considered real
Yeah.
Japanese civilians. They were looked down on, if I'm not mistaken. They
Mm-hmm.
were.
They were mistreated, and as Robert Leckie pointed out, some of the Japanese soldiers went guerrilla warfare. They got rid of their Japanese uniforms, started wearing blue Okinawan kimonos, not to hide or not to fight, but to fight guerrilla style. So they would kind of blend in with the civilian populace and do guerrilla warfare tactics. And so they had to, the Army and the Marines had to contend with that as well. And before we finish up this episode, please enjoy this little segment from episode 142 featuring myself, Jeff Copsetta, and Henry Sledge discussing more about the Battle of Okinawa.
In preparation for tonight's episode, I came across a story that I'm so excited because it's so brand new and it's fresh, and I just can't wait to share it with everybody. And it's got a little bit of a neat backstory. So months ago, and I may have shared this with our listeners. The library, anytime they have books that they're just doing away with, they kind of let me go through the trash before it goes out.
It's a nice problem to
And
have.
it's pretty cool. And there were 3 old books. And she said, look, I don't know what you'd want to do with them. This is the library director. She said, it's not going to offend me if you don't want them, but we thought of you when we saw them. And she said that, if you want to take a look. So let me grab it. This is the 1928 The Longhorn. Now, for us today, that probably sounds like a strange name for a yearbook out of Texas A&M. Of course, the Longhorn, as we know from University of Texas, a big rival. But the Longhorn was the name of the yearbook up
Now,
until about 1946.
for you guys listening to the audio version of this, Jeff's holding up this book, big ass book, that almost looks like the book from Army of Darkness. I don't know if that's rawhide on the cover of that thing. It looks like it's bound in flesh. I mean, it's a huge book.
But they're beautiful. They're beautiful.
Yes.
So The reason they were called the Longhorns, so they started in 1903, calling it the Longhorn, and it was to kind of, I guess, pay homage to the Longhorn State. This is before it was we were known as the Lone Star State. It was the Longhorn State, so that only made sense. And I think it's really interesting when you first open it up. There's a little message that says they will soon pass away. Those dreamy college days with a nice illustration here, and there's some color in here. Um, and I just thought that's interesting, those dreamy college days, because uh, we probably think, oh gosh, how fast the world turns today. Oh, how time flies. And even, I'm sure, not that long ago in 1928, that was not a new thing either to think that, oh man, these dreamy college days will soon pass away and we'll be off to the world. So I thought that was an interesting connection. So there is a colleague of mine that teaches here at the high school. There's a few that are proud graduates of Texas A&M, and one of them happens to be a teacher of my son. And I flipped through this book and I saw that there were pictures of there was a lot of girls in here, which I thought was strange coming from an all-male school. And so she goes, "Oh, there can't be girls in there." So I said, "Well, I figured I'd go ahead and bring it to school one day
Can I
and
can I guess?
let her take a look." Go ahead, yeah, go ahead and guess.
Was there a sister school and they merged the two to save money on pressing of yearbooks?
Best we, I think that was actually what she had said as well. The best we can guess, these are sweethearts,
Oh,
assuming from the senior class.
I gotcha.
And yeah, and there was also a Duchess of the Cotton Palace, uh, kind of a local deal here, the A&M Duchess to the Cotton Palace. So here's, I know for our audio listeners, this isn't going to do much, but if you're watching,
She's
what
the
a great
bee's knees.
photo, right?
Let me
From
ask you this, as
1928.
somebody who's working in education, and probably will have a few yearbook photos taken of yourself. Do you see the template of the modern day yearbook as you're looking through that, or was it substantially different in 1928 versus today? I mean, the
Oh,
layout, the format of it. Because I mean,
good
yearbooks tend to
question.
have kind of a template.
Yeah, no, I think very similar. You go through, of course, you go through all the faculty and everything, and then you go through the senior classes. Now, what's interesting is they sometimes will show you where they're from. If they're not a native born citizen, they may say that Korea or something like that. But for the most part, just guys in uniform. What their major is, their age, their rank, of course, because at this time, if you were in the Corps here, you were you were in the military. Um,
Just
but
think,
not to get too far off on that.
well,
I don't want to get
just
too far off on that.
well, you know me, I love a good rabbit hole. Just think though, that faculty that you're looking at, the ones who are in their 40s, they were born in 1888.
Oh, right, absolutely.
Imagine
Most of
just
these
the
guys
history
are,
that those
yeah,
guys saw.
right. And so thinking if these guys graduated in 1928, most of them were 23, 24, somewhere in there.
Hmm.
So you're looking at what these guys are about 40 um, during the war. These
Yep.
are these are potentially your light colonels, your full birds, your brigadiers, one-star generals during World War II. So interesting. And for those who don't know much about Texas A&M and its history, it really is a special school. And if you know anything about the history of this, how they served the country, World War I and World War II, you should really look into it because yeah, it's about 2 hours from where I'm at. I've had the opportunity to go up there. I was asked to speak at one of the classes there, which was really cool. This was years ago, and got to watch A&M whoop up on Iowa State at the old Kyle Field and just experience everything that is Texas A&M. It was really moving. So, um, moving forward, after I let my colleague kind of look through and she kind of helped, translate some of this for me being an Aggie. She had mentioned that her she had two relatives that served in World War II. One was from her mom's side, one was from her dad's side. And the interesting thing is these guys were buddies and served on the island of Okinawa together. So I want to share a little bit, just kind of wanted to spotlight, and I have her permission and the permission from her family. I just wanted to kind of spotlight um, this particular veteran. And by the time this hits our website, there will be a picture of of the veteran as well.
And real quick, just because Jeff's audio cut out for you guys listening, he said the island of Okinawa. When you said Okinawa, it cut out, but go ahead.
Oh, okay. Was I being censored? Uh-oh.
No, you dropped out just for that one word. So I just wanted for what island did he say?
Oh no. Yes, Okinawa. So this her maternal great uncle is who we're really kind of paying respects to, and I want to keep his history alive. His name was Sergeant Cecil Holycamp. He attended Texas A&M University, and he listed following Pearl Harbor, along with most of the cadets and students on campus. He was a member of the 96th Infantry, the Deadeyes, in the 383rd Infantry Regiment, Company K. He was killed in action in April of 1945 during the Battle of Okinawa. And he said, according to her great-grandfather, it was by a sniper. The interesting thing here is his GI Bill was used by his family to rebuild Trinity Episcopal Church in Junction, Texas. Now that right there, I thought was really unique because a lot of times we say, "Oh, he bought the farm," right?
That's where the saying comes from.
That's where the saying comes from, right? A lot of times, and we may have said this before, where the GI Bill went to the family and they literally would pay off the farm or any debts with what they got from the losing their son. So the fact that his GI Bill was used to rebuild this church in Junction, Texas, was really kind of impressive to me. I've never heard of that before. I thought that was really interesting. So her paternal grandfather, Sergeant William Allen, was best friends with Cecil. So from her mom's side, Cecil, and from her dad's side, this William Allen, they were best friends. They both attended A&M. They enlisted together. They were classmates in Aggieland. And this guy was also a member of the 96th Infantry, but he served in the 381st, where her great uncle served in the 383rd. He was awarded three Purple Hearts, and he had shrapnel in his brain until he died, and he was terrified of x-rays. He never talked about combat, and he dealt with a good deal of wrath from Cecil's mother since he came back without Cecil. He did tell his grandmother, though, that he recited the 100th Psalm in foxholes as a means of coping, and that he promised God that if he survived the war, he would never leave the ranch. With the exception of visiting granddaughters in Dallas, he kept that promise. And he told me, this being my colleague, that my grandmother saved his life. Now, the interesting thing about this, a little just Cecil Holycamp, you can find him, and he comes up. He was awarded the Bronze Star for bravery at Leyte, and he was a machine gun section sergeant on Okinawa. And he is mentioned in a book, Texas. I want to say it was the Texas Aggies at War, where and they kind of go through all of the fighting Texas Aggies that I'm assuming all that were killed in action. That's all I could see as I was cruising through. But the section about Sergeant Cecil Holycamp was that he was leading his machine gun section on the morning of 9 April, 1945 at Caucasus Ridge when he was killed in action. And it was his buddies wrote home that he was a good guy. He was a good friend. And that was what was written home to his family. So, again, I included a picture. She was nice enough to share a picture of Sergeant Cecil Holycamp. And he was also featured in the newspaper, of course, when it came out that he was killed in action on Okinawa. But all of a sudden, this really kind of became a little bit personal because, again, this is just somebody I work with. This is an educator that, that works at the same high school as me and teaches my son. And she also mentioned, of course, Aggies, when they graduate, of course, they get a ring. And she had recovered her Billy Allen's, he's the one who survived the Battle of Okinawa. She had his ring that was very dirty when she had found it, or when she had gotten it, and it was, in her estimation, that dirt. She talked about digging foxholes in Okinawa. That was probably particles of Japanese soil that came home on that Aggie ring as well. So I thought that was very interesting. And to see just an obscure, just a face with a name, a guy in uniform, just doing his job, leading his machine gun at Kakasu Ridge at the beginning of what became the defensive perimeter around Shuri, the Shuri line, was just really interesting to me. And to think that these two buddies, one guy coming home, it's hard enough to come home,
Mm-hmm.
right? I can't imagine it's got to be even harder when you come home, but your best friend doesn't. And, you were that close to be able to still stay in contact, with the family. So, really awesome. I really appreciate her sharing it with me and giving me the permission to share it with all of you. And if you're not sure what the Shuri line is or what Kakasu Ridge even means, I know that was a meat grinder. They estimated 96th Infantry Division suffered 200% casualties, which is just unbelievable. And I think at this point, I'd kind of like for Henry to kind of fill in some gaps and really kind of paint the picture of what it was like from his perspective and his research on what it meant to be fighting in those early days of April in that particular part of Okinawa.
Sure, I can speak to that. I'd actually had looked up a couple passages here and with the Old Breed about when they got into Shuri, which was end of May. But let's adjust on the fly here. At Kakazu Ridge, I remember I have come across quite a bit of stuff where both published and unpublished, where my dad talked about Kakazu Ridge.
You want me to buy you a few seconds?
Yeah, could you do that, please?
For those of you not familiar with the Okinawa campaign, I'm by far no means an expert, but I did refresh myself a little bit. And as we've spoken in the past, one of the things that worked towards us as a benefit, being the people fighting the Japanese, is the Japanese, they had a lot of infighting within their military structure. And one of those infighting was the Navy and the Army they decided to do their own things at all different times, and the other one had to play catch up. And so when it came to Okinawa, the Navy thought, hey, this would be the perfect place to whittle down the Americans. Let's hold them off. Let's try to take out as many of them as we can before they attack our homeland, Japan. The Army said, not so much. We're pulling out most of our forces. So believe it or not, Okinawa was only defended roughly by a little over 100,000 men, but a good portion of those were basically Okinawan citizens who were forced into military service, anywhere between the ages of 18 to 40. And a lot of the death count that Jeff kind of talked about earlier and that Henry will get to momentarily, a lot of that was basically because of the geographical location. The island that was made up. The Japanese set up bunkers in the Okinawans' burial mausoleums. They had their way of remembering their dead was to put them in caves, and basically the Japanese took over those caves and entrenched guns there. And they basically had another thing that gets into this is we're all familiar with bonsai charges and kamikazes. Well, the whole Okinawa campaign from the Japanese was based off of kamikazes, the wind. Obviously, they had the kamikaze planes, which, by the way, at that point, most kamikaze pilots only had 3 weeks to a month and a half of training. They were basically just trained to take off and crash. They also had the bonsai charge. That was a big part of their infantry. And what I forgot and didn't realize is they actually had about 350 small boats packed full of explosives who were kamikaze boat crews. They were just to drive their little crafts out and try to blow up as many crafts as they could before they went out. And so it was a very hard-fought campaign. Casualties were high, once again, because of the fact that we were on the disadvantaged side of trying to perpetrate these natural caves, the horrible weather, etc. And hopefully Henry is ready to go.
I'm ready to go. So after that personal involvement, that personal story that Jeff just shared with us, let me just give a little historical context here. So this is reading from With the Old Breed. All right, the portion of when my dad was doing a little strategizing and explaining to contextualize everything once they were really starting to get going on Okinawa. Of primary importance to the defense of the island were 3 east-west ridge systems crossing the southern part of the island. To the north and just below the invasion beaches lay the ridges of Kakazu and Nishibaru. In the middle, running west from Shuri Castle, was the most formidable of the ridges cut by sheer cliffs and deep draws. Above the extreme southern tip of the island lay Kanishi, Yuzadake, and Yezudake. Together, these ridges formed a series of natural defensive barriers to the American forces advancing from the north. Into these natural barriers, Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushijima threw the bulk of his 110,000-man 32nd Japanese Army. Natural and man-made barriers were transformed into a network of mutually supporting positions linked by a system of protected tunnels. Each of the ridge lines was held in great strength until it became untenable. Then the enemy withdrew to the next defense line. Thus, the Japanese drew on their experiences at Peleliu, Saipan, and Iwo Jima to construct a highly sophisticated and powerful defense in depth. There they waited and fought to exhaust the will and the resources of the American 10th Army, of which the aforementioned 96th Infantry Division was part. And there's one little paragraph that I'll tack onto the end of this is later on, where my father talks about, he says, meanwhile, 3 Army divisions were coming up short against fierce Japanese resistance in the Kakazu-Nishibaru Ridgeline, the first of 3 main enemy defense lines in the southern portion of the island. Stretched from left to right across Okinawa, the 7th, 96th, and 27th Infantry Divisions were getting more than they could handle and were making little progress in their attacks. And he's saying that in the context of, they landed April Fool's Day, and for quite a bit of time in early April, it was almost like a holiday. It was so completely unexpected. The landing was unopposed. And it was just unexpectedly easy, but they knew that once they got down into the southern portion of the island of Okinawa, that the Japanese were not going to give it up cheap.
Yeah, because part of that strategy, like I said earlier, the Army pulled out a good portion of their men. And so the men they had left, they put a few up in the northern part of Okinawa, kind of just to slow us down a little bit. But a majority of their crew was manning the Shuri line and then the southern end of the island so that they wouldn't get outflanked. And so, as Henry was saying, as we landed in the northern and the northeastern side, as we were coming down, it wasn't until we ran into this little groups of basically roadblocks, if you will, that we started facing some interference, and that kind of withered us down and slowed us down before we got to the Shuri line, which things really got rough.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sure. And it's definitely, I think it's important, and like Henry said, with the Marines and Army landing, or maybe Don said, to try to coordinate that many divisions, that many men, and 3 different branches of the military. I mean, what a logistical nightmare. And, the Marines, of course, first kind of securing that northern end of the island were not nearly the defensive positions were more towards the south. So, of course, what was thought when the Army was hitting a brick wall, of course, the Marines were like, let's go save the day. So yeah, I've got something here I wanted to share as well. It was a nice little write-up, just a little bit of a history of that fighting right around that time. As the Americans advanced pushed further south, it read headlong into fortified Japanese positions and heavily defended caves near Kakasu Ridge, the first defensive perimeter, and what would be called the Shuri Line. The rapid advance and relatively light American casualties sustained so far on Okinawa ended. American commanders realized immediately that the Japanese had been withholding their strongest defensive efforts and had deployed them in an area in which the terrain favored the defenders. There would be no more lightning advances. In a period of just 24 hours, American casualties ashore nearly doubled. Okinawa was realized would become a bloody slugfest. The Army's 96th Infantry Division lay before Kakasu Ridge on the morning of April 8, 1945, and prepared to make an assault on the positions that had halted their initial advance. With no preparatory artillery barrage, the 2 companies of infantry jumped off from their positions before daybreak so as to achieve surprise. One company from the 96th, under the command of Lieutenant Willard Mitchell, reached the top of Kakasu Ridge before Mitchell and his men were pinned down by furious Japanese fire. The Americans were unable to dig in on the rough coral tops of Kakasu and thus were exposed to well-aimed rifle fire and shrapnel from all angles. The Japanese, knowing they had their enemy at their mercy, sprang from their caves, hurling grenades and satchel charges at the pinned-down American infantry. The Japanese assault was halted with heavy losses. Mitchell's men repelled the Japanese assault in hand-to-hand combat, with fixed bayonets and rifle butts. Now, this is 8 April 1945. The very next day, 9 April, would be Sergeant Cecil Holycamp's last day. And I wanted to show, for those who are watching, this is the patch of the 96th Infantry Division, the Deadeyes. So really, really
I've never
cool
seen that
story. Yeah. Yeah, it's a neat one. So again, thank you to the family for allowing me to share that. And Henry, really thanks for really going into an explanation and just knowing your dad was there right there with somebody that I run into being a relative of, just really kind of ties things a little bit closer for me and in the keeping history alive. So and what a great mail call from our buddy in Charleston, South Carolina, talking about Okinawa. I thought that was great.
And Okinawa was, rough sledding. Not only, as we said, the fighting against the Japanese, but the mud, the living conditions, the rain. But as we said, a good portion of the military was conscripted Okinawans. And part of the way the Japanese got them to fight, other than to do the horrible things in which they were known for back then, is brainwashing and fanaticism. If anybody's done any reading or watched any specials on Okinawa, you know what happens once we started liberating villages and towns and areas, that the Okinawans were so brainwashed by the Japanese that they were told that the American Marines and American Army were cannibals and criminals and rapists and thieves. And so as we're trying to liberate, and that's the other thing too, is up until this point, there was very little. I mean, there was some, but not by no means this caliber of civilian areas. I mean, there's a lot of civilians involved. And as we saw portrayed in the episode on the Pacific, they're all held down at the bottom of that ravine, and these civilians are coming down. And we've all heard the stories about the grenades and using them as bait, machine gun fire, and all that. The Japanese by no means had any real care for their fellow man, let alone the Okinawans. And so as we're liberating places, people like Henry's father and the gentleman Jeff's talking about, they're watching mothers throw their babies over and then jumping over cliffs because they were afraid that we were going to do horrible things to them after we liberated them. And so not only do you have to deal with what you saw in combat, but then you had to sit there and look at that at the end of the day. It's just a rough environment all the way around.
Yeah, for sure. And then if I could jump in real quick
Please.
and say this, if you're interested in hearing more about Okinawa, there's a great book by my friend Saul David called Pacific Crucible. And it is strictly about the Battle of Okinawa. It fairly recently written too, just came out in the last year and a half, maybe 2 years.
I can't remember the sergeant's name, sorry. But he had a relative. He fought in the Civil War for the South. And I've seen photos and I've read the article, but I can't remember the gentleman's name. When we actually captured Siri Castle, no one had an American flag available on them at that particular time. So while a person went back to find one, he actually pulled out a Confederate flag that he had in his haversack and flew it over Siri Castle for a short period of time, much like his great-grandfather would have done during the Civil War.
That's right here with the Old Bridge. You want me to hit that paragraph?
Absolutely.
About mid-morning on 29 May, 3-5 attacked the Shuri with Company L in the lead and Companies K and I following closely. Earlier in the morning, Company A, 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, had attacked eastward into the ruins of Shuri Castle and had raised the Confederate flag. When we learned that the flag of the Confederacy had been hoisted over the very heart and soul of Japanese resistance, all of us Southerners cheered loudly. The Yankees among us grumbled, and the Westerners didn't know what to do. Later, we learned that the stars and stripes that had flown over Guadalcanal were raised over Shuri Castle, a fitting tribute to the men of the 1st Marine Division who had the honor of being first into the Japanese citadel.
Jeff mentioned earlier that when the relatives got his Aggie ring, had the dirt and the mud on it. And my first thought was, that shows you how much love they had for their state and their school, because as we know from watching many series, not all of them did, but a lot of guys wore the Marine Corps ring. And he opted to wear his Aggie ring. But the question I had for you, Henry, is, Do you still have your father's ring, or was that a movie thing, or did he actually wear his ring through combat as portrayed in the miniseries?
That was a movie thing. I do have a ring back there in the back room, the gold Marine Corps ring that was his. He did wear it, but he didn't get it till after the war.
Gotcha.
So I got to be honest about that. Well, that whole thing with the ring, you'd think that I would know where that originated from, and I'm just really not sure, because they made a big deal about showing that like little signet ring that Joe Mazzello wore, and I don't think that my dad wore anything like that.
While we're on the subject of the show and true and false of Hollywood versus reality, what about the EGA on the lapel? Was that something him and Sid Phillips actually did?
Yeah, he did, because he says that there's not one on that dungaree jacket right there, but he did have one, because he talked about it before hitting Peleliu.
That's a cool little artifact, though.
Since we had talked about Shuri Castle, this is a sake cup. I know our listeners can't really see it, but this is a sake cup that my dad picked up in the ruins of Shuri.
Wow. If you could take a nice clean photo of that, we'll put it up on the website so that the audio listeners can share. And same thing with your book, Jeff. If you could maybe take a picture of that cover and maybe just one or two of the pages. That way our audio listening people don't feel like they're missing out on anything.
That's a good point. And you guys have seen all this, but this is the Japanese NCO samurai sword that he also picked up in the ruins of Shuri.
And how long do you think that thing is? 3.5, 4 feet?
Yeah, about that. 3, 4.
Now, I don't know the amount of time before they got picked up between the Battle of Shuri Castle and when they left, but that's not exactly a non-cumbersome thing to carry around with especially when you're lugging mortar gear around. I mean, add that to your pack. I mean, I guess you could have put it across the top, but that's just one more thing to actually have to lug around with you when you're already prioritizing your gear.
As you guys probably know better than I do, they're people who they can tell you everything about samurai sabers.
Yeah, I'm not one of them.
Everything. I mean, in that one, it's an NCO, a Japanese NCO. It's not an officer. It didn't have a jewel in the hilt. It's a very simple, very basic, but well,
it's, I don't want to say crazy. It's cool, and especially for the Japanese culture, how much they relied on that samurai aspect of the religion. Because even when I was watching clips on Okinawa and they were talking about how they were using all the old planes and poorly trained bad pilots to be kamikaze pilots, they showed them getting in the cockpit with that sword.
Yeah.
Your first thing is, what are you going to do with that up there? But it's more of kind of, to them, it's their crucifix around the necklace. Same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was never, we've heard tales where sometimes a saber was drawn, but most of the time it was just there to connect them with their religion and their belief system.
Yeah, I was just looking. My mother-in-law gave me a sword that, when I first saw it, it looked like, oh, maybe this is like Civil War era, 19th century. Turns out my son was like, hey, Dad, I think that's a Japanese sword. I'm like, no. And he goes, no, check it out. Look. And I want to say, and I wish I could grab him. I want to say it was Type 32, maybe. That sounds familiar. It looks like it's been spray painted black, but it's in pretty decent shape. And I'm trying to remember what the heck.
Usually down by the hilt of most cutlery, whether it's a sword, a knife, or whatnot, there's usually a maker's marker, some sort of indicator that might give it a little prominence, as they like to say.
It might. While we're on the subject, I'm gonna take a quick break. Let me see if I can grab it real quick for y'all. See if you can tell me something about it.
I don't know the first thing about swords, but I'd like to see it regardless. And while Jeff is doing that, I want to remind you guys, I want to thank each and every one of you for your continued support of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, your favorite World War II based podcast. And I want to thank all the new listeners that are heading over and signing up for Patreon. That goes a long way to support what we do here. Even if you only sign up, I don't even want to say only, even if you sign up for just the dollar amount count, which is all all we're wanting you to do. There's 2 other plans on there, but if you want to sign up for those, great. If you sign up for the $7.50 a month plan, we will send you a free t-shirt after month 2, which, by the way, for those of you watching on video, you look down in the corner, that's our new WTSP logo. And for some of you on your podcast apps, some of them have updated, some of them have not. iTunes has not for some reason, but Google and Spotify showed the new logo. We have that new logo available on shirts, hats, towels. Henry sent me a message, and I will say this. I am a bit of a hat snob, and I don't get to choose the material in which this stuff gets printed on. All this stuff is print to order. We don't buy any of the stuff. It's when you order it, they usually wait 3 or 4 days to see anybody else orders, and they print, and they mail it directly to you. That way I'm not buying boxes of T-shirts and hats to sit around my house. It's mailed to order, and so I'm limited on what material they have. And since I'm a hat snob, I don't like crappy hats. Working in radio, there's been so many times someone will give me a hat with their company name on it, and it may be a cool logo, but if the hat bill has 3 stitching on it, it's going to be folded. It's going to be cardboard that doesn't hold a fold. Usually they have Velcro straps on the back. Those are the ones that people cut corners on. No, they don't fit very well. No one wears them, so it's a huge waste of money. So they had 3 options. They had the trucker hats, which had the normal snapbacks. Then they had what looks like to be flat bill hats. You could probably curve them. And then they had the dad hats, which had the crappy bills and the Velcro. I did not even bother to put those up because I did not want people to spend their hard-earned money on that particular hat and find out that it's rubbish. So there's a trucker hat and what appears to be flat bill, but you can probably curve. And those look like nicer hats. The beach style I haven't seen, but the shirts are up there. The hats are up there. They got mugs and all kinds of silly stuff up there. Backpacks, but once again, the backpack was expensive and I didn't know the quality of it. I didn't want to put a logo on something, sell somebody a backpack, and then they send us an email, hey, my kid had this for 2 months and fell apart, so I didn't want to risk it. But that being said, you can head over to WTSPWWII.com. It came to my attention that people weren't sure how to get there. I made it that way because, one, it was available. I don't know if you noticed, but when you go to what'sthescuttlebutt.com, it's kind of spelled funky because the proper spelling, the full What's the Scuttlebutt, was already owned by somebody else. So when I first launched the podcast, that's why it's spelled a little funky, and that's also why I bought WTSP World War WWII, just like you see World War II written out on the old TV shows on the books. Obviously, the Roman numeral, we had to use lowercase I. So WTSP WWII.com, or you can go to d-410.com to get there. But you can find a Patreon link and our YouTube channel and see all the photos that we talk about whenever we have guests on. You can go there, find the page that coincides with their episode, get the proper links if you want to find them on social media. Maybe they're working on a project. So all that stuff is available at WTSP World War II, WWII.com. Jeff, find your sword?
Yeah, that's when you know you have too much stuff. I wasn't even sure where the heck it was. It was out in my outbuilding. But I mean, nothing about this looks, to me, it doesn't look like a Japanese sword.
I almost look Civil Warian.
Right,
Yeah,
that's
what I was
exactly
thinking.
that's exactly what I thought. But like I said, I want to say, I don't see any marking. There's a couple numbers, but other than that, I mean, there's just nothing. But I want to say, let me see if I can find the type. I want to say it was a 32. No, not type 32. I can't remember what the Japanese. Yeah, type 32. And when I look at images of it, this is it. It's just been painted. Type 32 saber was government issued cavalry sword. It was first issued in 1889 and would be crafted until the end of World War II. Though by the end of World War II, where they'd been serving in Manchuria and China. So if you look at those pictures of a Type 32, and you can see there's kind of a strange design that runs down. A lot of the pictures have it's like a two-tone, and it's there. It's just been painted over. So it looks very 19th century because it's 19th century.
Yeah, I'm on a website
original.
called Bygone Blades. It says the Type 32 model 1899 had a machine blade that was manufactured at the Tokyo Hotel Kosho Arsenal. The sword saw service during the Russo-Japanese War, World War I, and into World War II. 2 patterns of the Type 32 were produced. The first pattern, known as Ko, was issued to cavalry NCOs and had a blade length of around 833 millimeters. The second pattern was known as Atsu, was issued to the Army NCOs and was shorter with a blade length of around 770 millimeters. Let's see this example, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, the Steel D-Guard, which is what made us say it looks more Civil Warian. The Steel D-Guard has a checkered steel backstrap and a dove head pommel. Does yours have the dove head on it? On the end of the pommel? I don't know if it's actually a dove's head, but they call it a dove head pommel. All of which retain the original finish. And, that's that particular one. But yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Put some lacquer thinner on to get that spray paint off.
Right.
Yeah, it almost looks like the handle is made out of the backstrap. Looks like it's steel, and the front almost looks like engraved wood.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I haven't done anything with it. I've been afraid to, but just based off of like trying to do a visual ID on it, that's it.
If you look down by the handle, down by the hilt, is there like a squeeze lever that would release the sheath, or is it broken off? Yep, that's exactly what it is. That's pretty cool.
This one's got one just like that.
Oh, yeah?
The
squeeze lever?
Yeah, a little squeeze button.
Yeah, and it locks
right
in.
here.
Yeah, it's very reminiscent of kind of like what the bayonets have on the back of them, on the American bayonets, to lock them onto the sheath.
I'm pushing it right there.
That's cool.
Yep. Same design.
Yeah, it's definitely wood and steel. So the forefront that would go underneath your fingers is wood grain, and then the back is it's a steel material.
Well, that may be a restoration project one day, but not for me. Maybe my son. He's the one that identified it, so I credit him for that for sure.
Well, not that you care, but it's always fun to know. A few of these examples are going for about $600.
Yeah.
In the non-spray painted form.
That adds like character. It's patina.
No, see what you do is you tell people they painted it so that it wouldn't glimmer in the night. Yeah, that's it. Right. That's the ticket. Yeah, that's it.
It's a night bonsai charge cavalry sword. It's tactical.
No, they probably spray painted it so they could stash it in the back of the closet or their crate and somebody wouldn't see it. Who knows? People, somewhere between 1945 and the present day, people had a weird addiction with painting military stuff black. How many times have you seen ammo cans, jerry cans, swords? For whatever reason, they love to spray paint crap black, and they love to cut all the straps off of haversacks. That's the two things I can tell you. All those haversacks and musette bags. I went to college. The college kids I don't need that strap. Cut. It's like, oh no.
Yeah. How about 1911 holsters? You see a lot of the leather dyed black at post-war. Yeah, for sure.
I wonder if that was a Vietnam thing. Because didn't they issue them in black in Vietnam? A lot of those 1911 cases.
Possibly, yeah. I would think by then, yeah.
Yeah. So while Henry scurried off to do whatever he's doing, let's get started. And hey, Jeff, what you reading?
Well, man, I am almost done with A.J. Langut's Patriots, the men who started the American Revolution. I've got maybe one more night. And I mentioned last week, I think it would be cool to go ahead and reread with the old breed. Not 100% set on that, but that's going to be coming up in the near future for sure. Like I said, I'm kind of torn between that or maybe I do have a couple books on Iwo Jima, but if you're interested in anything about the American Revolution, I will say that book really spells it out. It's really well done, chronological order. A.J. Langut's Langguth, Patriots, the men who started the American Revolution. Great read.
Henry, what you still reading?
I finished Big Week, and I started Hang Tough by our good buddy Jared Frederick.
Great book.
So I'm jumping off into that, really enjoying it. I'm enjoying the way.
How far into that are you?
Not that far yet. I'm probably, my copy's upstairs, probably around 50 pages, I would say.
You're into it enough to see how nice it is to cover new ground with him. The source material for that book is fantastic.
Yeah, and I like the way, you guys know the project I'm working on with my dad's stuff, so it's really like I've got a real vested interest in seeing how Jared laid that out. You know, using the heart of it is Dick's letters to Deetta Allman, and then of course Jared provides he bridges it all together with his own narrative, and Eric Gore. I don't mean to not mention Eric Gore,
Eric his due.
But they string it together and create that cohesive narrative with their voice. So very interesting to me.
And it provides great insight into Dick Winters and some of his, non-airborne, non-firsthand account sort of thoughts on how he thought about the war going on, life,
physical fitness,
people in other ranks, physical fitness, his disdain for gold bricks. You definitely get a more well-rounded view of him as a person and as a leader.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to read Jared's book on Spears, too.
Yeah, I want to get that one next as well.
Spears was one of my favorite characters in Band of Brothers.
And there's so much mystery surrounding him.
Yeah. We had a great chat with Jared. Jeff, were you on that night, or did you have to miss?
No, I actually made that one. I do. That was months ago.
It was several months ago, yeah.
That was right when you first came on board, isn't it?
Yeah, I had him on twice before. I think I had him on once before Jeff came on. I think I had him on the second time when it was just me and Jeff. He's been on the. Okay. I think he's leading the board on return guest.
You're probably thinking an earlier time, Jeff, because I've been on the show for a little while. Because I didn't even start working on my project till the end of the year, beginning of 2022. So.
Oh yeah, no, it was before you came on then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was. Yeah, he's a good guy. Sounded like a really interesting story and how he put that together.
So
sure.
I'm still halfway through The Longest Book, or The Longest Day. Very good read. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was going to read a little segment tonight. I thought was cool. When we all see Omaha Beach, we think of that bunker, that concrete block. It's up there. There's a very, and the way it's laid out, I probably shouldn't talk about it. I should have just said it next week, but whatever. There's a very great description of how they basically said the commander pulled up in the Volkswagen. He gets out, walks down along a path along the sea ledge, pulls up, walks down a path that has barbed wire next to it, then goes down some stairs along the sea edge, goes through a cave, up roundabout stairs, and he's explaining what path you had to take to get into that damn bunker. And so, but you don't know that. He's just talking about this weird path and these stairs and all this stuff, and like, wow, that's kind of cool, because you look at that photo, you never think, I wonder what it was like, how do you got in there? But no, it's the description on how the effort it took to get in there and the security to prevent people from getting there is very cool. And there's a lot of great little in-depth things in there. It's a very good book. But I want to take my moment and what you're reading to say I did, in fact, sign up for Goodreads, and I was not familiar with this website. You guys should go ahead and sign up because it's very cool. You basically go in there and you start typing the books you've read, and you can give them stars. If you want, you can write reviews. You can put in the book you're currently reading, books you want to read. And that way, if people do want to check up on us, we can post our profiles on WTSPWorldWar2.com, and then people can follow us there as well. And we can take the What You're Reading segment a little more for people who actually want to see what we read in the past, maybe stuff we talked about on episodes past. Like right now, I just signed up for the show. I have Longest Days, what I'm currently reading. I have Battleground Pacific in there. I got Band of Brothers. Beyond Band of Brothers, the War Dick Winters memoirs in there. I got With the Old Breed in there. China Marine I got in there. Citizen Soldiers, Challenge for the Pacific, Strong When Armed, Helmet for My Pillow. And that was just the ones I typed in 15 minutes before we went on the air. And so it's kind of cool. You can literally catalog all the books you've read. You can give them between a 1 and 4-star, 5-star review. And then if you want to actually write a review, you can. And so it's pretty cool. It's called goodreads.com.
Yeah, look into that for sure.
Yep. Look at that, guys. It's Monday. We went 105 minutes. It's probably the only podcast you've listened to this Tuesday that didn't bring up the Super Bowl one time.
Thank you.
Yep. Didn't even watch it, but anywho. But I think that's just about going to wrap it up. Jeff, you got anything coming down the pike you want to get out there?
Well, just our Iwo Jima program / author meet and greet with with Dennis Blocker II. We've had him on the show before, and we'll have him on again. He's going to come up to our Highland Lakes Air Museum and talk about his grandfather's service in World War II and kind of a twofold topic. He's going to talk that and then also a little PTSD awareness, PTSD for trauma nurses and paramedics, which is his personal story. So yeah, we're gonna have a couple table displays. I've got a non-firing woodpecker machine gun, Japanese machine gun. We'll have on display a couple of Arisakas and some of my combat gear and weapons that you would have seen from the American side. So I'll have multiple table displays for people to come through and see weapons and equipment used by American and Japanese forces during the Battle of Iwo Jima. And I've got some Woody Williams. Some cool Woody Williams merchandise from when I did a program with him, and some sand from Iwo and things like that. So that's this coming Sunday on the 78th anniversary of the invasion of Iwo Jima, 19 February.
Henry, do you got anything coming down the pike?
Yeah, this coming Sunday, I will be back on the We Happy Few podcast with Matt Leach hosting. And we're going to be on there with the author, Dick Kemp, who wrote this book, Last Man Standing, the 1st Marine Regiment at Peleliu. So Dick Kemp will be on there. I will be on there, and Saul David will be on there. So
it's a nice panel.
So
that's a nice panel.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to talking to Dick Kemp. I've never met him. Interestingly enough, I'll throw this on there too. So today I talked with a guy who first reached out to Dick Kemp, trying to get to my family. Talked to a guy named Mark Connor with the Library of Congress. They want my dad's Bible to preserve it and house it. So,
how do you feel about that?
That's a tough decision.
Man,
or is it?
He started telling me the things they have there. I mean, they've got original hand-drawn maps by George Washington. They've got Lewis and Clark's journal. They've got a D-Day map from the Voggy, a guy named Mr. Voggy, who was a beach master. His family handed over his full-color D-Day map that he carried, to work off of as a beach master. They've got, some phenomenal things. I mean, that's why I brought it up. Kind of interested in what you guys say about it, but the
good news is it's on loan. It's not like if for some reason 8 years from now something needs, it's not like you're giving it up permanently, but that's still something that's kind of hard to.
If I do this, and I talked to my brother about it, because I'm the World War II voice of the family, but I wouldn't do this without consulting with him. Because I'll tell you guys, I mean, my dad's artifacts, you know how many of them I've got? A lot of them are at Auburn. I want to get them all at the World War II Museum in New Orleans. My mom was always really funny about the Bible. Mm-hmm. She just made me swear to never let it out of the house. But that was not a binding like deathbed. Sure. Do not, that I know the context she meant that in. It would be, I mean, look, they can preserve it. Yeah. They're experts at that. I mean, it could not be more prestigious than the Library of Congress.
I was going to say that kind of elevates, I mean, amongst World War II and PTO aficionados such as ourselves, we already hold your father in such a high pristine, but I think by having that there, it just raises him to a whole nother level.
I'm thinking about it. I mean, my brother told me he's cool with it if
and it's paper, as Jeff can tell you. I mean, between the three of us, this guy's worked at more museums than any of us. I've worked at none.
Sure.
But, that stupid photo right there, that's a poster I got off eBay for $13. It's an original poster from World War II, but I knew that I didn't want it to fade. So now I got a $13 poster and a $150 frame with UV protected glass, acid-free paper. I got the window covered up, and it still risks it fading. So to preserve paper takes a lot of energy. And I know you got that thing wrapped up and in a box, but Jeff can tell you.
Yeah, I'm glad I don't have to make that decision. Because I think that would be something if I were Henry, it would go to the Library of Congress upon my death. I feel like I would want to be able to touch it anytime I wanted to. Um,
That's
and when
true.
you were gone, maybe then would be the time. That's just me. Maybe I don't know, Henry. Man, but then you don't live to see it being there. I don't know.
But
That's
then
really
you,
tough.
but then as someone in our position who quote unquote want to keep history alive, you got the aspect of, well, more eyes are going to see it and keep it alive if it's on display.
See, that's the whole thing with me trying to get my dad's stuff, excluding the Bible, in New Orleans. I mean, because for many, many years I was like, no, I got this stuff. I want it. Nobody's getting it. But man, it's that. Think about how many people would get to see it. You know, so not to make
No,
the last part of our show.
I think that's a very important conversation, and I'm sure our listeners may have something, and I don't want to brush over that. I mean, that's a hard decision.
Yeah.
Well,
mean-
the guy, to give the guy, not to cut, just finish your
No,
thought,
go
Jeff,
ahead.
but let me say real quick. The guy said, look, you don't have to decide tomorrow or next week or next year. He said, I just want to, that thing is an iconic piece of American culture. And I just want to make sure that it's got a good home. I'm sure you're giving it a good home, but we would be honored to house it, preserve it, occasionally display it. You know, they've got millions of documents. I mean, come on, you know, it's not like it's going to be 24/7 on display. I'm thinking of it for posterity, knowing it would be well cared for. So,
well, and I think Jeff's got a good point. I mean, that could be in your living will or whatever. If God forbid something happens,
that's a thought.
Yeah, I think that's how I would handle it, only because I'd like to, while you're into this, yeah, I get the aspect of more people will see it there than at your house, but I don't know how important that is to you right now. I mean, like I said, to me, to be able to have something like that personally, in your possession, while you, with the platform that you have and being able to do some of these other podcasts and symposia and things like that. I don't know. Again, I'm glad I'm not making that choice because he's right. Yeah, that's an iconic document, and it deserves to live on long, for generations. Because when people aren't watching the Pacific or hearing Henry's story, that's just going to be another Bible. We certainly don't want that. So,
and that's the thing too, is that's not just a Bible with your father's note. That is the cornerstone. That is the backbone. That is the reason why we know his story and how he was able to, that was his. This is a little inside baseball for you listeners, but that was his equivalent to a Google Drive document that we all write notes on to remind us what we want to talk about on the podcast. That was his punch card. That's why he wrote everything down.
Yeah.
That was the key to this whole thing.
That's a tough call, and it makes me think about I've had many times people will ask me, "Oh, what's your opinion on if I buy this uniform? It's an original uniform, it's in really good shape, but I don't want to buy a uniform if I can't wear it, so I'd have to get it a little altered. And what is your take on that?" And to me, of course, this is a lot different than the Bible, but when it comes to kind of telling the story and like Don said, keeping history alive. I always told people alter it.
Yeah, there's 2 billion of those things made.
Well, not just that, but who says it wasn't already altered?
Yep.
Because typically uniforms came in 2 different sizes, big and too big, for the guys wearing them, and so it may have already been altered. And number 2, and most importantly, if you don't alter it, you don't wear it. It's sitting in a closet. Nobody's ever seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
You alter it. You don't change the history. You're altering the fabric. You're not altering the story. And being able to wear it, present it, talk to the public, show it off to kids at a program, wearing it, for a living history event or whatever it is, to me does, has much more dividends for the person who originally wore it than, hanging up somewhere never to be seen. So yeah, there's that fine line there.
And to Jeff's point, especially when it came to trousers, it was. They made a few different waist sizes, but the length was pretty much one length fits all. You had to have it cut and trimmed back. I mean, they weren't going to make 32, 34. It was 32, then 83s. I mean, those legs are super long, and you had to go get them trimmed off and hemmed up.
Right. Yeah. That's really cool, Henry. I mean, what a cool way to top off this episode talking
That
about.
came out of nowhere. I mean,
it's incredible.
You know, the dude reached out to Dick Camp, and then he got to Leighton, and then Leighton let me know. And the guy called my brother too. But yeah, I'll keep you guys. You know, I'll let you know as I think more about it.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the two coolest artifacts you have is probably. I mean, the K-bar's cool, but there's just something about that damn haversack that just.
Yeah.
Makes the hair stand up on my neck, especially the fact that he painted it with, has the camouflage paint on there.
The daubed, yeah.
Yeah.
I told you guys that last morning of the international conference. Richard
called
Frank,
that thing the Holy Grail.
Huh?
When they called that thing the Holy Grail.
Well, Richard Frank took Saul, my wife and son, and me. He said, "I want to take you guys through the Pacific Gallery personally, because he designed it." And we had a delightful morning. Went through it with Rich, and at the end of it, not like everybody's parting company to go their separate ways to go home. And I just said, Rich, I got a great idea that will probably go nowhere, but here's an idea for, how about a life-size diorama of that bunker on Ingusibus, mannequins kitted out like they ought to be, and all that beautiful gear. And I said, augmented with the real-life artifacts of Eugene Sledge.
Yep.
He said, Henry, it's a beautiful idea. I mean, all I can do is suggest it, but I don't know, man. The galleries are already designed and kind of already done, so
yeah. If they refresh that every few years, keep people coming back.
Yeah, I was gonna say that every 10 years they got to revamp, redesign, remodel.
Is it every 10 years, Jeff? Is that what it is?
Typically.
Okay,
especially for a
good
big place like that.
Yeah.
But I'd love to see my dad's stuff over there.
Yeah, we would too.
At the archives at Auburn, where a lot of his stuff is, just got an email this week that at the Veteran Resource Center there in the Student Union building, they want to pull his dress blue uniform, which they have there, out of the archives and display it. So the archivist was asking my brother and me what we thought about it. And of course we were like, yeah, sounds, we know you guys will take care of it. So that'll be a cool thing.
Just a reminder, we do want to hear from you guys. So send us an email at mailcall@WTSPWorldWar2.com. And we do have a YouTube channel, which is the What's the Scuttlebutt YouTube channel. So look on YouTube and just search for What's the Scuttlebutt, or just go to WTSPWorldWar2.com and you'll see videos posted there, and you can follow the links to and like and subscribe. And I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode for the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast. Thank you guys so much. Until next week, we'll talk to you all soon.
This has been a Digital 410 production.